Today's topic is shifts in demand. This is an essential topic for Class 11 Economics, Microeconomics, Chapter 3, Demand. We'll begin with the definition of demand. What do we think of when we hear the word demand? It's when we want something done immediately, when we're commanding someone to do something. For example, I demand you to subscribe. Just kidding, but just what a demand is. That's what we think of when we hear demand. But in economics, the word demand has a completely different definition. It's the quantity of a commodity which a consumer is willing and able to buy at a given period of time and income. So if we break this down, we see a quantity of a commodity. So when a consumer is willing to spend his income on a said quantity of any good or service, he's willing, which means with choice, he wants to buy that, and he's able to, meaning that with his income, he's able to afford this commodity in a given period of time. So it could be in a season, a month, a day, a week, and given income and period of time. So demand is constant in the two constants that we look for in demand is the time period and the income of the consumer. So essentially, when a consumer is wanting to and can afford to buy a quantity of a commodity, that would be the demand of the commodity. So if a consumer is willing and able to buy 2 cans of Coca-Cola, then the demand for Coca-Cola for that consumer is 2 cans. And in this case, we only look at the individual demand because this is microeconomics and not macro. Demand is always subject to changes. And this could be a change in the quantity demanded or the change in demand. These two terms sound very similar, but they're not. Change in quantity demanded means that the demand is changed due to an increase or decrease in the price of that commodity. For example, if the price of Coca-Cola increases, the demand decreases because demand and price have an inverse relationship. If price increases, demand decreases because the consumer is less likely to spend more money to purchase the same quantity. We can see this in our daily life as well. If the price of any product increases, our parents tend to buy less of it because we may not be able to afford it. So change in quantity demanded is a change in demand caused by an increase or decrease in the price of that commodity and no other factor. Whereas change in demand is a change in the quantity demanded of a product caused by external factors, not including the price of that commodity itself. And so to graphically represent these two, for change in quantity demanded, we look at movement along a demand curve. And here we see terms such as contraction and expansion, etc. But in this video, we're only going to be looking at shifts in demand curve, and these are graphically represented in a change in demand. So for a more lucid explanation, I'll only be taking one commodity for the entire lesson, which is Coca-Cola, more specifically 1 can of Coca-Cola. So if we look at a change in demand, this change is caused by factors excluding the price of Coca-Cola itself. So all the external factors like the change in price of substitute goods, change in price of complementary goods, the change in the income of the consumer, change in tastes and preferences, and a change in season and weather. So all of these changes they don't include the price of the good. So here the price remains constant, but demand still increases or decreases. Let's look at each one very specifically. Change in price of substitute goods. A substitute good is a good which can be used in place of a commodity. So a substitute good of Coca-Cola would be Pepsi. Pepsi and Coke taste more or less the same. So if the price of Coke increases, demand of Coke decreases. And if the price of Pepsi decreases, the demand of Pepsi increases. So when there is a change in price of a good which can be used in place of Coca-Cola, then the demand would increase or decrease. Suppose the price of Pepsi increased, then the demand of Coke would increase, and the demand for Pepsi would decrease. So we can say that a change in price of substitute goods also affects the demand of Coca-Cola. It's also influenced by change in price of a complementary good. Complementary goods are two goods which are both required for full satisfaction. So when we drink Coca-Cola, we also need to have a straw for a more seamless drinking process. So we could say that Coke and straws are complementary goods. The price of this complementary good, or a straw, is also impacting the demand of Coke. Let's say the price of the straw increases. That means the demand of the straws also decreases. And when a consumer is buying less straws, he's also likely to buy less Coca-Cola, because they're both complementary and they cannot be used without one another. Obviously, this is just for representative purposes because Coca-Cola can still be consumed without a straw. But just to exemplify the concept, I'm giving this example of Coke and straws. Suppose the price of the straw decreases. Then the consumer is more likely to consume more Coke as well because he's able to buy more straws, and therefore he'll also have to buy more Coke because the two goods are complementary. Next is change in income of consumer. We already discussed that price and demand are inversely related. So if the price increases, the demand decreases, and if the price decreases, demand increases. Suppose the consumer has a higher income, means that he has a higher spending power as well. He has the ability to purchase a higher quantity, and we assume, based on monotonic preferences assumption of consumer's equilibrium, we automatically assume that the consumer always seeks a higher quantity of goods, and he's more satisfied with higher quantity. So if his income increases, he's more likely to spend more and buy more Coca-Cola. This means that the demand for Coke increases if the income of the consumer increases. And similarly, if the income of the consumer decreases, he's likely to tighten the belt on spending, cut down on some unnecessary expenses, and most likely the demand for Coke will also decrease because he buys less quantity. The demand is also impacted by change in tastes and preferences. So, suppose one day you decide that Pepsi tastes better than Coke. On this account, the demand for Pepsi would increase and the demand for Coke would decrease. It could also be impacted by preferences and public opinion. For example, in around 2013 or 14, there were allegations against the Maggie Nestle company that Maggie contains lead. And so based on this allegation, the demand for Maggie decreased significantly. They almost went out of business. And so suppose there was also a similar allegation on Coke that it contains pesticides, or something irrational like that. Then the demand for Coke would naturally decrease because the public opinion believes that Coke contains pesticides and it would be harmful for the body. It may not necessarily be true, but it does impact the demand because at the end of the day, the consumers define the demand of a commodity. So that's what change in taste and preferences means. Lastly, change in season and weather. During winter season, our parents tell us to drink less soft drinks and any cool stuff in general. So during the winter season, the demand for Coke decreases because people are less likely to spend or purchase or consume Coca-Cola cans. And in the summertime, people enjoy drinking Coke because it cools them off. It keeps them cold in the hot, humid weather. So this is how season and weather also impacts demand. In the summer season, demand increases. In the winter season, demand decreases. So now let's look at actual shifts in demand. A shift means that the demand increases, but the price actually remains constant. So the consumer is willing to buy more or less of a commodity. His quantity increases or decreases due to factors excluding the price of the commodity. So in this graph, you can see that the price is constant. The price here is constant, but the demand has increased. It has gone from Q0 to Q1. And this is a rightward or outward shift. So when the demand increases, it's called a rightward shift. And you can see here, this is summer season. So the time period given is summer. As I mentioned earlier, in the summer, we have a tendency to purchase more Coca-Cola as it cools us off. And so that's why due to this factor, due to this season, the demand curve experiences a rightward shift. The prices remain constant. The demand increases due to the season. So in this schedule or graph, we can see that the price of Coca-Cola is 20 rupees, whereas the demand in units or cans increases from 100 to 150. That represents a rightward shift. Here we can also see a leftward shift. Now it's winter season, so the demand for Coca-Cola decreases as it's not safe or healthy for us to consume cold beverages in the winter. We prefer warm beverages to keep us warm and regulate our body temperature. So we can see that the demand decreases. It went from Q to Q1 and D to D1. And this is a leftward shift. It moved towards the left. And in any x-axis, you can see that the quantity increases from left to right. So 0 is the origin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when it's a leftward shift, it decreases from 5 to 4 or 4 to 3. In the winter season, the demand decreases, and this graphically represents it. So a rightward shift is an increase in demand, and a leftward shift is a decrease. And we can see that over here in the schedule as well. The price is constant 20, but in winter season, the demand decreases from 100 to 50.
And now let's look at how we can implement rightward shift and leftward shift in these various factors, excluding the price of the good. First, change in price of substitute goods. So if a substitute good such as Pepsi, if the price of Pepsi increases, then the demand for Coke will increase, so that would be a rightward shift. Whereas if the price of Pepsi decreases, the demand for Coke would decrease, and that would be a leftward shift. Similarly, for complementary goods, if the price of a straw would increase, the demand for Coke would decrease, and that would be a leftward shift. Whereas if the price of the straws decreased, the demand for Coke would also increase, and that would be a rightward shift. If the income of the consumer increases, he would have a higher spending power and he would purchase more, so the demand would experience a rightward shift. And if the income of the consumer decreases, he would tighten the belt on spendings, and there would be a lower demand, which causes a leftward shift. Change in tastes and preferences. Suppose one day you wake up and you suddenly feel like Pepsi tastes better than Coke. Then due to your personal taste, the demand for Coke would decrease and Pepsi would increase, so Coke demand would experience a leftward shift. It could also be defined by public opinion. So if one day Coke is declared as containing pesticides, the demand of Coke would decrease, causing a leftward shift. Similarly, as we just looked at season and weather, in the summer season there's a rightward shift in demand, and the winter season there's a leftward shift. So that's how the concept of rightward shift and leftward shift can be implemented to describe all these various factors that impact demand, excluding the price of the good. So that concludes this video. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I hope you had a great learning experience. Until the next one, this is Ch.3 signing off. Peace.